Greetings, Neuse Little Pod listeners. This is your host, Matt Gore, reminding you to please like, follow, subscribe, and share the podcast on your available podcast apps such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, iHeartRadio, and any other podcast app you can think of. Share our episodes on Facebook and let us know what you think with a comment or review. Now, please enjoy the show. Hey, gang. Neuse Little Theater is back with our second show of 2021, and that is the romantic comedy John Cariani's Almost Maine. And the dates for that are May 14th, 15th, 16th, 21st, 22nd, and 23rd. That's 2 weekends. Your Friday and Saturday shows are at 8 p.m., and your Sunday shows are at 3 p.m. for the matinee, and those will be masked. The Sunday shows will be masked, and you must wear your mask and socially distance while you're here, and call the number 919-934-1873 and leave your name and how many people want to attend and the night you wish to attend. Thank you very much. Hello, and welcome to Neuse Little Podcast, an audio program discussing the almost 50-year history of Neuse Little Theater and the backstage antics and stories that come along with running a community theater in a small town. I'm your host, Matt Gore, and we are coming to you from NLT's stage and base of operations, the little log cabin located on the banks of the Neuse River in Smithfield, North Carolina. We lovingly refer to it as the Hut. And now, Neuse Little Podcast listeners, we are very excited to present to you part 2 of the conversation with Tony Pender. Enjoy. So, and continue to talking about your path as a director here. So your first show at NLT was a very important show that we've discussed. We've had Sammy on. We've discussed this show a lot, but I am very curious to hear about it from your perspective. Probably one of the best shows we've ever done here at NLT. I don't think that's a stretch. It always comes up when we're talking about the ones that are always remembered, and that is To Kill a Mockingbird.
Yeah.
So tell us you've done it twice. So
Yeah.
Take us back to the beginning and tell us what it was like that first time around.
Wow. Yeah.
Get in the Wayback Machine.
Yeah, it is. It is the Wayback Machine. Well, listen, you got to understand, by that time, the whole idea of community and family as part of the theatrical experience was well entrenched here. Mm-hmm. I mean, it always had been. And that was one of the things that brought me in and that brought me here and got me to stay, was that whole feeling of community and family. And when they talked about doing To Kill a Mockingbird, I really, really, really wanted to do it. I mean, the book itself and the movie had both made a huge impression on me as a kid. And I really wanted to, especially for this community, to make it as much of an experience as we could, to make it not just a theatrical experience, but a community experience. Because yes, the play itself is about family, but it's also about the community that family grew up in and how they interacted with it. And I kind of wanted to parallel the experience that Scout had living through that play for the audience. I wanted them to feel like they were as much a part of the community as the people on stage were. So, oh boy, that's probably one of the reasons why I designed it the way it was designed, with the tree growing out of the stage and all that kind of good stuff, and getting the church involved, the ladies with K-Cats. It was really funny. Joyce would tell me that people would call up and ask if the church ladies were going to be singing that night, and if they weren't, they wouldn't buy a ticket, because that was as much a part of it. I had never seen that particular thing used in a theatrical event before. I had been to services like that, and I really, really loved them, and I really enjoyed them, and they're as much a part of the Southern life as everything else that's part of that show. I really wanted to incorporate as much of the community and as much of what it was like to grow up in the South as I could. Because that's what I think the play does, and that's what I think the playwright did, and the original author that did. I think they were trying to give us that slice of life. We talked a little bit before about how plays aren't really written to make statements. I don't think that one was either. I think it was really written about how people make choices on a day-to-day basis. Little choices and big choices. And seen through the eyes of a young person and seen through the eyes of grown-ups, and how that experience from both a young person's point of view and an older person's point of view, it takes all of that to make a community, to make a family. And I really wanted to make sure that that's what came across. And that's probably why I cast it the way I cast it as well. Because I think that surprised Sammy more than anything. Well, you know as well as I do, Sammy walks on stage and he's everybody's daddy.
Yep.
That's just him.
Yeah, some actors have very good stage presence, and
Yeah.
Sammy does. Sammy does have good stage presence, but
Yeah.
Sammy also has excellent emotional presence.
Yeah, he does.
You know he has something to say when he says it,
Yeah.
and you shut up and listen.
And that's one of the things, and honestly, that's part of the Southern life as well. My grandfather was the same way. He's one of those people that he didn't talk very much, but when he did, he didn't have to yell. He never yelled. Didn't have to, because he chose real specific times when he spoke, and when he did, he had something to say, and it was pretty damn important. And everybody listened. I got to kind of sidetrack for a minute.
Please.
My dad recently shared a story with me about my grandpa, and how back during in the 30s, he was a deacon of the church, and they had a pot-bellied stoves in the church to help keep it warm. So they had a big old coal pile out back that they pulled the coal from. And somebody found out that one of their neighbors had been stealing coal from the coal pile. And it was it was Depression era, so not a lot of people had money. And this particular guy who was taking the coal was taking it to keep his family warm. So the deacons of the church, though, were not very appreciative of it, because they were like, we're doing everything we can to make ends meet too, so we should probably do something about this. And my grandpa listened, and he listened, and finally he said, "I've got something to say." And again, my grandpa's always been that way. He kept his mouth shut and just sat and listened until he had something to say. And so the entire board was like, "Go ahead, Mr. Pender, we're all ears." And he goes, "Listen, we've got plenty of coal and he don't have none. Let him take what he wants." So yeah, and that's kind of the same thing that Sammy has, which is, that if he says something, that it's going to mean something, and that it's not just somebody shooting off at the mouth. It's somebody who has something to say and who means what they say, and they're not going to say it if they don't.
Right.
And he brought that to the stage. He brought that to the auditions. You should have seen at I'll never forget Sammy Smith's audition for that. Brother sat down with, it wasn't Olivia that time, it was Mary Lee. During the audition, brother sat down with her. I didn't even have to tell him, he just did it. Because that's Sammy. He knew he had something to say to a little person, so he got down and where the little person was, and he said it. And you can't, you can work with an actor, and you can eventually get them what you want to do. But you can't teach that kind of understanding
Right.
of other people. You just can't. Lord knows people have tried and still do. But it's not something you can teach them. When an actor walks in that has that already, you'd be a dumb director if you didn't figure out how to use it. And all the people in the cast were that way. I'm sure Sean has gotten no ends of stories about the first time he got his ass whipped on stage.
Well, we had Sean on, and we had Sean and Mary Lee on the
No.
same on the same episode.
No, you did not.
We did. We
Yeah,
did.
yeah, yeah.
But no, they talked about stories of being young and growing up in Neuse Little Theater and especially To Kill a Mockingbird. But tell me briefly about how he got beat up on stage.
Oh.
I don't remember this specifically.
Oh, you don't?
I don't think he got into
No,
it.
I don't think he told this story, although it might have been briefly sort of like mentioned, but no, I don't think he actually told
Well,
it.
it's not that big of a story. I mean, he played Jim in the show, Scout's brother. And the lady playing Cal was she was a real straight up no nonsense lady. And we were doing rehearsals, and I was like, well, what would you do if some kid talked to you like that in real life? And she goes, I'd smack him in the ass. I said, well, go ahead, do it. And you should have seen the look on Sean Braswell's face when I told her to smack him in the ass. His eyes got about as big as this mic pop filter. Oh, my God.
That's young Sean Braswell. The current Sean Braswell would just give like a raw smile and go, okay.
Exactly.
No, she grabbed him by the arm and jerked him up.
Oh,
so he
geez.
was standing tall, and she just hit
You
him.
could hear it at LBJ's.
But
next
how happy
door.
were you? I've been in rooms where you're trying to get people to do that, and they don't. Like, hit him with your purse.
Yeah.
Hit him with your purse.
Yeah,
Hit
no.
him. Come on. He's asking for it, but
listen,
she did it.
She did. You got to give her credit, dude, because we had been doing this whole thing, and up until that point, we were debating about how she should react to it, how she should react to his behavior. Because even back then, even little, Sean's always had a mouth.
Yeah.
What? And no, that's one of the reasons he played Jim. Is because I knew he could say things that nobody else could get away with. You know what I mean? He's still that way.
we brought that up on the show. It's just like there's these things like, how does Sean get away with the things he gets away with? Nobody knows.
Nobody knows. That's him. And he was that way even when he was little. He could do things and say things and get away with things that nobody else in their life could have gotten away with. And in this case, he didn't get away with it. But Cal and I talked about it, and I said, well, go ahead, let him have it. And she looked at me like, I was like, yeah, go ahead.
What's funny is we keep talking about Sean being little. I think he was like 16 or so at that age.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
But he's always been little.
Yeah, he has. But she did. She pulled back and she gave him a grandma pop.
Knowing you the way I do, I'm sure you were thrilled.
She spanked him like she was one of his own. Her
Yes.
own. It was good.
Which is, again, having grown up in that,
Yes.
is exactly what would have happened.
Correct.
Tell me I have not had this little old lady down the street snatch me up and tan my little butt. Even though she wasn't family, she was still one of the neighbors. And Calpurnia was family. So you didn't get away with stuff like that.
Right.
And again, that's part of the reason why I think that particular show works so well is because the audiences here, all of them have, if they haven't lived through the specific time, place that To Kill a Mockingbird happens, they live in a community like that. The people that exist in that play exist in their day-to-day lives, and they understood that. I understood that. It goes back to that thing of it's not a director's place to judge what's happening in the play. It's not our job to be standard bearers for our own agendas. It's our job to look at what was written. Look what the writer gave us, because God knows they worked on it hard enough to try to understand it to the best of our ability and to present that as clearly and as truthfully as we can. The only thing that balances that out, or that changes that or affects that, is the place in which you're producing. We've all had to make adaptations to plays that we do and performances that we do based on the community in which they're performed. That's because it is, especially for live theater, and one of the things that we miss so much about it right now is that it is a community experience.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you walk in the door with your own agenda and you try to smack people over the head with it, they're going to ask you to leave their house. The same way they would if you came smart-mouthing over their dinner table. At the same time, we can sit around and eat fried chicken and have iced tea and have differences of opinion and argue and yell at each other and throw each other around the backyard. But at the end of the day, we're still community and we're still family. And that's kind of the way I've always approached it. It wasn't always that way, unfortunately, for some actors. Because again, when I was first finding my way, brother, the goal for me was to get what I needed from an actor regardless of what it cost.
What it costs. What does that mean?
Well,
Elaborate for us.
Well, see, if you're asking people to go to places that they don't usually go, that they're uncomfortable with, there are many, many different ways that you can help them do that. Young directors often make, and I see this, gosh, I see it a lot. Young directors make the mistake to think that they have to manipulate, manipulate and mold an actor. Really isn't. And again, I did that as a young director as well. I tried to mold people and manipulate people in every way, shape, or form I could. The same way that I was molded and manipulated. That only works if you've been doing this for a while. And if you're self-aware enough of what your own things are before you can do that to somebody else.
You have to be honest with yourself
before you can
what
be honest.
you were doing,
Yeah.
before you try to get the truth out of somebody else.
Exactly. You got to know your own truth first, and that always takes a while. In the beginnings, I made some serious mistakes. Not just in the ways that I attempted to get actors to bring themselves out, but in choosing some people and casting some people, forgetting the fact that, again, it is a community and you have to fit these people together, because for the next however long it's going to be, 2 weeks, 6 weeks, 6 months, these people are going to be family. So you got to put the right people together. You can't just throw 6 people in a house and say, y'all are going to live together for the next 6 months. Get used to it.
Reality TV would beg to differ with that, but whatever.
Yeah.
That's
But I ain't
produced too.
But that's the thing, is we're not doing reality TV here. You know, if I was doing Big Brother's house, that'd be one thing, but this ain't Big Brother's house. Especially for things like To Kill a Mockingbird, because that is about family. At the bottom line, regardless of what else is going on, even Bob Ewell, it's all about family.
Right.
And that show taught me more than anything. Those actors taught me more than anything that help people get to where they need to go, and then take your damn hands off of them and let them do it.
Yes. Yes.
Um,
I discussed it briefly on Ruth's show, but I'll briefly revisit it here. One of the best lessons I ever learned in directing was, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If it's working, leave it alone. Because especially young directors, they want to prove themselves and they want to nitpick it to death. But I'm just like, if it's working, leave it alone.
Yeah. They get married to an image that's in their heads. And it's not about the image that's in your head. It's about the image in the head of the person who put this stuff on paper, who put it down in black and white. The biggest challenge, though, is, just like you said, you mentioned earlier, the biggest challenge has always been finding the language that the actors talks in. Finding the actor's language, and every actor has a different language.
Yeah. Well, let's get into that. I was talking about before we started recording, breaking down preconceived notions that the actors have coming into like a read through or something like that, and how you more than anybody else, you like to break down those preconceived notions.
Oh yeah.
And I think people misinterpret it as saying like, well, we're going to do it my way. It's not that.
No.
It's not that. It's more. It's like we're doing this together.
Exactly.
And you're already coming in with a formed idea, and we're just starting here.
Exactly.
Don't you agree? Yeah.
It is. Well, that's the thing is that we all do that, even in our day-to-day lives. Even in our day-to-day lives, we have a tendency to go, let me make a picture of what I'm going to be. And then let me do everything in my absolute power to fit myself into that picture. And that's, that's great for some people. It works for them, it drives them, it gives them the success they want. But one of the things that I found, especially when it comes to acting, is that you have to get rid of that picture, that litmus test, that frame of what you think it should be, because, and this is the one that hit me the hardest, was the things that happened on that piece of paper that you're given, or that movie that you saw, or that picture that was drawn. That was a specific group, that was a specific family of people in a specific place at a specific time. That was them, there, and then. Well, now it's us, here and now. So we're going to have to take all these words and adapt them to us here and now. Otherwise, we could all just be androids.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or we could just put the movie on. Or
Or we could just put the movie on.
Yeah.
Or we could just watch a cartoon. That's one of the reasons why I don't think they'll ever be able to replace actors in any way, shape, or form. I don't care how good AI gets. I don't care how good CGI gets. You are never going to be able to replace an actor, because there's that element of surprise that every actor brings to every single thing they do. There's always an element of surprise. And that's probably one of the reasons why I keep staying on that side of it, the directing side of it, is because the surprises that you get are even more enjoyable than if it had fit the image that was in your head perfectly.
Right.
If we had matched the movie in your head shot for shot, scene for scene, the surprises make it that much more enjoyable.
Well, and I just, to chime in,
Yeah.
I tell people all the time, it's like, they'll go, so who are you thinking for the part, if I'm going to direct? I'm like, I'm not thinking of anybody.
Exactly.
And they're like, how do you do that? I said, because if I think of anybody in particular, I'm not open to ideas. And sometimes when you audition for some people for a part and you'll go, oh, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
And like the chemistry between these two people is something you hadn't even planned on. And you get something so much better than what you had in your head. But you've got to be able to be open to seeing the possibilities of what's that you couldn't have planned for.
Right.
And it's just
Yeah.
that's the joy of directing, honestly, is seeing something going, oh my God, this is so much better than I could have ever.
Yes. Vivian Worrell as Hoke in Driving Miss Daisy.
Oh yeah. She was spectacular.
She was freaking amazing, and people thought we were out of our freaking minds.
So yeah, she's playing the male Morgan Freeman role.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
That wasn't something that people would automatically think of.
Heck no.
And we hid her name, so nobody knew who it was playing the part, because she didn't want anybody to know it was her.
Yeah. And it was the most amazing thing, and then that again, it came out of not going into it with a preconceived notion. The auditions is just seeing what happens, just putting people together and see how they react to each other, how they work with each other, how they deal with each other. It's one of the reasons that's probably one of the hardest things that I have to teach actors is, listen, it's not about whether you got, it's an audition. It's an audition, folks. It's not, I'm not expecting you to have anything memorized. I mean, God bless you if you do, But it's an audition. It's not about the words that are on the paper. It's about the person that's saying the words. Same thing when we get into the whole Shakespeare thing. It's not about the words that you're saying because they're what they are. It's about the person who's saying.
Correct.
Let me see that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't care how good you speak the Queen's English. One of the ones I love to use is, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? That everybody goes off on this whole, it's almost Romeo and Juliet. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Summer days in 1600 in England were sucky. It was hot, it was nasty, it could rain any frickin' minute. There were no paved roads, so everything was muddy. And even if it wasn't muddy, there were insects out the yin-yang. Everybody stank. Nobody took a bath. You know, if you got a bath once a month in 1600, you were lucky.
Yeah. So the context of the times is everything.
Things that would be completely and totally acceptable now, if they had been done when the show was originally done, would have gotten the place shut down and burnt down.
Right.
I'll give you another case in point. Sound of Music. Biggest piece of cotton candy musical theater you could possibly have. Beautiful show. Beautiful show. But it ain't Beckett, right? Mm. I got cast as Herr Zeller in one production of it. And the director, who was well known for trying to take standard material and twist it, or at least give it more depth and more meaning and more impact, actually absolutely did that with Sound of Music. As Herr Zeller, he had me come out when Herr Zeller finally reveals himself as a true National Socialist Nazi. Brother put me in an SS uniform. Had me line up the entire family and go through the entire family one by one.
So, and this was to establish you as this transformative moment or something like this, that you're a monster now?
Well, it was, up until that point in time, Nazis were bad guys, right? But even now, today sometimes, we seem not to understand the exact depths of what that was.
Right, right.
That it's no different from, you know, the bad guys in a Keystone Cops movie. Routine. That, you know, it's no worse than, you know, a couple of guys punching each other out in a parking lot. The actual horrors of what they did impacted life on a daily basis, and no one literally was safe. And one of the things that he wanted to establish for that family was how dangerous a situation they were in.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So that's okay.
Yeah.
So in that small moment,
your children are not safe.
Gotcha.
Because in general in the show, the Nazis are sort of just this
Bumbling.
ominous big bad over here in the distance.
Yeah.
Everybody knows they're bad, so we don't have to show how bad they are. So he wanted to make sure everybody knew how bad they were. Mm-hmm. So
That the danger was real and it was immediate. The Von Trapps didn't just take a summer vacation when they left.
Yeah. I was going to bring that up. I was reading an article where, they were driving in a really bad direction at the end of that play, right?
Yeah.
So there's this dark underlying to this whole very happy, lovey story.
It really is. And honestly, once I got through it, once I came to terms with it and dealt with the kid and the kid's family, which was another whole thing.
Ooh, count me out for that one today.
Yeah.
No thanks.
you have to be real. No, you have to be completely, totally open and honest, and the parents have to buy in and understand. The kid has to buy in and understand too. And that's a challenge in and of itself. But I got to tell you that it was kind of transformative for our audiences. And the director was really smart, because from that point on, this tempo of the show doubled. It was not, we still had the fun and games song, but it was all not fun and games. And when they left at the end and they made it in the end, the audience were on their feet. That also taught me that you have to maintain that context when you're producing and you're directing for audiences now. You've got to be aware of who they are.
Right.
You have to be in touch with the people who are going to be sitting in the
Yes.
chairs, because you're going to put them through an experience. And you've got to be damn sure where you're going if you're going to ask them to come along with you.
Yeah, we talked about this during Safe when you came by and did that one night with my fight choreography. It's like we're taking the audience on this ride, and it has to be a ride with a beginning, middle, and end. It can't be just like, we're here, we're in the shit now.
Yeah.
You can't just, you have to ease them into it, in other words.
And not just to ease them into it, is you have to let them know that they can trust you
Right.
wherever you're going to take them. Listen, the fact that I could do that in Sound of Music wasn't just some arbitrary decision. We spent, I would say, a good year and a half in our productions up until that point, making adjustments going along so that we could adapt the pieces that we were doing, and at the same time maintain this kind of material. I mean, it ain't fun doing, not that American classical musical theater doesn't have a place. It absolutely does. And some of the music in it is some of the most beautiful stuff you could listen to for hours and hours and hours, and God knows that we as people in the theater do. But that music has a place and a context. And that place and that context doesn't exist anymore. It doesn't exist. In some cases, it doesn't even exist in the memories of the people who are going to come to see us. So we have to do everything that we can to be aware of our audiences, be aware of the history of the material that we're doing, and then see if there is some way, shape, or form that we can bring that experience to them.
Right.
And they have to trust us for us to be able to do that. So that means that, yes, we have to do things that they know and they're familiar with. But if you do it in a way that is just a little unfamiliar, that takes it out of its historical place and brings it a little closer to who we are, right here and right now, it's one of the reasons, going back to the original question of why I chose to do Midsummer the way I did it. It's because of where I was doing it. It was so much easier for people who were coming to this show and this theater to understand these couples out in the middle of a tobacco field and these funky spirits who were based on Native American culture, who everybody who was around here knows about in some way, shape, or form. That made the material, that the words that were coming out of their mouths, that much more accessible and that much more understandable. And that much more fun, honestly.
Yeah.
You got
Yeah.
the jokes better.
once they saw like the pig picking and the backyard barbecue thing, they were like, oh, okay, I can relate to this.
Yeah, I know where we're going.
Yeah.
But that's the whole idea, is you put them in a place that they know where they're going. And then once they're on the ride, then you can take the ride wherever you want to go.
And speaking of the ride,
Yeah.
and in trying to direct those moments that you're referring to here, and creating a particular skew on a play, that when giving notes to actors, especially those that are not that familiar with it, what's your approach? Because you give brilliant notes. I know some people will disagree.
Yeah, they will.
I can think of one or two people that would.
Yeah, they will.
But
As well they should, because sometimes I give dumbass notes.
well, we're not all. No one bats 1,000.
Yeah. Yeah, no kidding. How do you give a note? How do you?
No, like, well, most actors know what the concept of notes is, but I swear I've been in some productions where I'm giving notes to somebody and they say thanks for the tips, and I'm like, no,
Yeah.
not tips. These are notes these are not optional.
Yeah.
Tony just says, write it down.
Yeah.
Write it down.
Get a pencil, write
Get
it
a pencil,
down.
write it down. Write it down, write it down, write it down. Listen, yeah. So look, when an actor comes to an audition, they do something, whatever it is, that gives you the idea as the director that they can perform this role. not just that they can perform this role, but they can embody the spirit of the character of this role. They can embody the spirit of this role. And the notes that you give are based on helping them either remove an obstacle from letting that spirit out, or giving them faith that that spirit is there.
Yes. Yeah.
Those are the two things. That's why I say write it down, write it down, write it down. You may not understand it right now, and that's fine and dandy. But write it down so that when you come back and look at it, you will.
And when you say obstacle, it just in my mind, it's one of two things. Usually, sometimes it's a bunch of little things, but usually it's the book or yourself. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, part of it's the book, but a lot of times actors will use the book and the words to hide behind, as an excuse for allowing a specific instance or a specific spirit or a specific behavior to express itself. Nobody wants to be the bad guy. Nobody wants to be looked at as if that person is them in real life. Whether it's good or bad. Because if you're that good of a person in real life, then I can trust you with everything, and that's a hell of a lot of responsibility. And if you're that bad in real life, then nobody's going to want to have anything to do with you. But that's the whole idea here, is every human being on the face of this planet has some of that good and some of that bad. Everybody's got a Jeffrey Dahmer. Everybody's got Jesus. So most of us, if we're lucky, we get a balance somewhere in between. Some of the characters that we have to play and that we have to create and who are part of our stories are those people. And we have to find those people in ourselves and show the rest of us and remind the rest of us what those look like. I used to get so mad. I would get cast as these horrible, horrible people. Like this Nazi guy from Sound of Music. Or crooked cops. Or I would just get cast as some of the most horrible people. And I used to get really upset. David cast me as Richard in Richard III. And I was like, number one, I can't believe you cast me. Number two, why would you cast me as this guy? He's the 14th century version of Hitler.
Yeah.
And that's like the farthest. And he goes, yeah, but you're a good actor. I know when you walk off stage, you can leave him there.
Yeah.
Well, and the other thing to remember is when you're talking about, these good characters, these bad characters, and all this sort of stuff, everybody's the hero in their own story.
Yeah.
So even though we look back, we have the privilege of hindsight on these people. But, at the time, even Hitler thought he was the good guy, so he didn't see himself. He's not, I'm an evil guy. He really thought he was the good guy in the whole story. And, we can go, oh no, that's, no. But if you're putting yourself in that character's shoes, you have to be able to see what that character saw in themselves.
Great modern day example of this is that someone that most of our theater audiences have heard of is Aaron Burr in Hamilton.
Yeah.
That story from his perspective, that which we do get to see a lot of, in his eyes is completely justified.
Oh yeah.
Completely
Absolutely.
just. That's what makes him interesting. Is just like at the very end when he shoots Hamilton and he just like, are you happy now? I'm the villain. Are you happy? Oh, chills every time.
But that's the whole idea. Is one of the things that the rest of us need to see, and we need it really, really bad on a regular basis. Is show me what bad people look like, and show me what good people look like, because I keep getting mixed signals. And as part of the performing arts industry, that's kind of our job. Is to show a mirror to the world of what these people look like so that when they see them again, they know them. So when I get cast as an evil character, Katie bar the door, I'm burning somebody's house down. And I'm going to laugh while I'm doing it. But that's the thing, is that you can turn that kind of stuff around, which is one of the things that I love being able to do, and I love being able to work, especially in a smaller theater where you can do that kind of thing, where you can have somebody play the most horrible person in the world, and you can have somebody play an absolute wonderful, absolutely wonderful person, and it'd be the same actor. And people understand it, and people believe it, and people go, wow, I didn't know you could do that. That is the thing.
Yes.
And probably one of the biggest compliments that a director can get is when somebody walks up to his actor and says, I didn't know you could do that. And you go, you know what? I helped. It wasn't me that did it, God knows. But I helped make it possible for that person to do that. Yeah. I get as much of a kick out of watching you guys get up here and people stand up. Because one of the things that it does to me is it validates the whole idea that when you walked in the room and you stood up there on stage and you put yourself out there, I saw something. I saw a specific something that put you in this role. And when these people out here watching stand up, I was right. It was there. And that's why whenever somebody comes up to me and says, you did a good job, I go, thank you, but I can't do it if it's not already there. Because I can't.
Well, when it comes to you as an actor, I've had the privilege of seeing you in a couple of productions. You're I don't think anybody's shocked to hear this. You're a damn fine actor.
Thank you.
Some of the shows I've seen you in have been very interesting, but among my favorites is this Dracula show down there at Theater in the Park.
Yeah.
And
God, I love
how
that
the
show.
hell did that come about? Because listen, I love Dracula, but it's hard to pull off on stage. There's a lot
Yeah.
of terrible Dracula scripts out there.
Oh my God. Oh my God. I've done some of those terrible Dracula tricks.
We did one. So
Oh.
they're just very talky.
Yeah, so they're more about like, did you hear about what Dracula did instead of showing you? And in this version, I'm just like, wow, this is actually a very thorough line, good adaptation. The Dracula doesn't even show up till halfway through. It should be called Theater in the Park presents Van Helsing guest starring Dracula.
No, honestly, that's really kind of the point. And then one of the reasons that David, I am never in my life going to presume to know what a writer was writing when they know it for sure. From a director standpoint, I can get a decent idea. From an actor standpoint, I can give it my best guess. And this one I was an actor, so I'm going to give it my best guess. One of the things that we have in common is that whole 60s and 70s era of horror films.
Mm-hmm. The Hammer.
Yeah, the Hammer films.
Yeah.
And this script is, I think, brought together with that kind of experience in mind. Which, again, it was graphic, but not overly so. Mm-hmm. The special effects were there, but they weren't the point of the show.
Right.
That's the way Hammer was. Hammer was about the music, he was about the tension, and he was about letting the audience scare themselves as much as he scared them. And David, I think, approached this the same way. He wanted them to be in a place where they could scare themselves as much as we scared them. And I was part of that, getting them to that place. At this point, he trusted me enough as an actor to know that I could take the audience to a place where they were comfortable.
You played, in case I wasn't clear before, you played Van Helsing.
Yeah.
To Ira David with the Force, Dracula.
Right. Who was, God, he was good. He was.
He is annoyingly good.
Really, really is.
He's a damn fine actor.
Yeah,
His voice was spot on, because if you don't get the voice, then forget everything else.
Exactly.
And his voice was just like, good evening, I am Dracula. I was just like, Of
Yeah.
course he got it right the first time.
It was Transylvania. Yeah, it was a Transylvanian without being Bela Lugosi.
Yes.
Which is a hard thing for actors to do. Trust. But yeah, that was kind of the whole idea, was to set it up so that the audience was, and that's a perfect example of what we were talking about earlier, about getting the people on the coaster. And that was kind of my job.
Yes.
Was to get the audience on the roller coaster, get them in their seats, get them locked in, get their hands on the handlebars, and say, "Y'all hold on, because we're getting ready to go somewhere."
Because your performance as Van Helsing is you get a full hero shot at the beginning when you come
No
in. It's
kidding.
like dun dun dun.
Yeah, exactly.
Van Helsing. I'm just like, God, you dream about that stuff as an
Yeah,
actor.
you do. You
Oh God, you could live so. You
I
could,
didn't, and that was the thing. When we first did it, I was like, I walked in, I was like, okay, I'm going to play Van Helsing. Great, I get to stab Dracula.
Right.
And I'm going to be a second. I'm going to be a second character. No. That was the thing that freaked me out, man. That was the thing that freaked me out. Was that it was almost like we had equal billing here, which again was understandable because again that's the way the Hammer films were. It wasn't about. It was less. The conflict in Hammer films was much more personal. Much more personal. It was Sigourney Weaver and the Alien personal. You know what I mean? And again, that's one of the ways that I think David approached it. Was it really was it had to be a personal battle. The better I was, the bigger Dracula had to be.
right.
You're gonna kick my ass. You better bring your fangs and everything.
Because it's a true interpretation of the character that I love. Because, listen, I'm a big fan of the Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula, and I'm a big fan of Anthony Hopkins. I am not a big fan of Anthony Hopkins' portrayal as Van Helsing in that film. But to see a great character come to life in a way, and what? Don't even get me started with that Hugh Jackman bullshit.
Yeah.
But
That's a whole different thing.
but to see Van Helsing truly come, it was great, man. I dug that show.
But that's the thing, and that I think David approaches a lot of things that way, which is there is no maybe a name, but there is not really. You can't have a star without giving them somebody to bump against. Mm-hmm. You can't have Dracula without Van Helsing.
Yes.
You can't. And the more you establish Van Helsing as a strong character, the stronger Dracula has to beat him, or that to even make the possibility of beating him. And that was one of the things that we had to work with as part of the whole rehearsal process. Was let's find where this balance is, what trips this trigger, because he really wanted us to keep it that way. Like you didn't really know. Yes, you've heard the story, and yes, you've seen the story, but the way we're creating it, you don't know until the very moment it happens that I'm going to win.
Right.
I want it that way. He wanted it that way, and I was like, it took me a while to understand it, because it took me a while to get over the shock. But yeah, once I understood that, because Ira. You better bring your A. If you're going to be on stage with him, you got to bring your A game. Mm-hmm. So from that point on, it was all right. Let me gear up and jump in.
Yeah. All right. Well, it is almost 10 o'clock. We've been going for almost 2 hours, and I think,
love it.
And it has felt not near as long. And Tony, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your experiences. It has been a hell of a ride, man. Thank you for doing this.
Well, thank you, Matt. Dan, thank you guys for doing this. It's important that we keep everybody in touch and keep us going.
Trying. That's what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, no.
And we got shows coming up. And by the time you hear this episode, we will probably be rehearsing our next show, Almost Maine. And we currently have Last Train to Nibrock going right now. And Almost Maine will have auditions pretty soon, so we're excited about that. And we're just going to do the best we can. I think we can open up to, as of now, 50% capacity, but within a small room. You still have to maintain the 6 foot and everything like that. So,
And who knows, by the time we do Almost Maine in May, we might be even more open. Who knows? So.
We're trying, people. We're all day to day. As we said, we're all day to day. All right. Thanks again, Tony. And Just good stuff, man. Thank you so much.
Thank
And
you, Matt.
Give my love to your family, your daughter, Nikki, and your lovely wife, Adrian.
Thank you, bro.
All right, man. All right. We're gonna put a pat on it right there. All right, folks. Until next time, this has been Neuse Little Podcast. Credits for the show. Your host and creator is Matt Gore. That's me. My producer and editor is Toole.
That's me.
Music is by Cody Walker. Please go look up Cody on Cody Walker Music on YouTube, and he's also on Cody Walker Music on Facebook as well. He's local, so and he's got a couple of albums out. So why don't you give him a listen? Easy listening, John Denver type of guitar voice, that Cody Walker. All right, thanks for listening. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.